The engagement ring struck the marble floor with a sharp metallic clang. Every conversation in the ballroom died. You've always been too ordinary, Adrian. Lena's voice was calm, almost gentle, which somehow hurt more than if she had shouted. She folded her arms across the crimson dress I had helped choose only 3 days earlier. I should have told you sooner. Around us, executives, shareholders, and reporters exchanged uneasy glances. Tonight was supposed to be our engagement banquet. Instead, every pair of eyes settled on me like I was the evening's entertainment. I stared at the ring spinning in slow circles. You waited until everyone arrived? I asked quietly. It was necessary. For what? So no one misunderstands my decision. A laugh escaped someone near the champagne tower before it was quickly silenced. Then a familiar figure stepped onto the stage beside her. Victor Ashford, my former best friend. He rested a possessive hand on Lena's waist without the slightest hesitation. We didn't want you to hear rumors first, Victor said. This is more respectful. Respectful. The word nearly made me laugh. You've been together. It wasn't a question. Lena nodded. For 8 months. 8 months. Almost the entire time she'd been choosing wedding venues with me. Almost the entire time I'd stayed late helping Victor rescue his collapsing investment division because he had called me his brother. The lights overhead suddenly felt unbearably bright. I trusted both of you. You trusted too easily, Victor replied. The audience remained frozen. No one stepped forward. No one defended me. One of the directors whispered, "Poor Adrian." Poor. I hated that word more than betrayal. Lena sighed as if she were exhausted by my inability to understand. You deserve someone simpler. I thought I already had. She looked away. Victor smiled. Let's not make this uglier. My fingers slowly unclenched. The ring had finally stopped spinning. I bent down, picked it up, and placed it carefully on the nearest table. I bought that. I know. I chose it because you said diamonds frightened you. She didn't answer. You lied even about that. Silence. The microphone beside the stage amplified every tiny sound, every breath, every heartbeat. Then Victor extended his hand. I hope we can still remain friends. I looked at it for several seconds before meeting his eyes. I don't. His smile faltered. Without another word, I stepped off the stage. Someone called my name. Another person reached toward me. I ignored them all. Outside, rain hammered against the city. The cold soaked through my suit within seconds, but I kept walking. My phone vibrated relentlessly. Mother, father, co-workers, unknown numbers. I switched it off. For the first time in years, the silence belonged to me. An hour later, I found myself standing beneath the towering headquarters of the Ashford Group. Every light on the executive floor was still on. Typical. Someone was always working. Especially Elias Ashford, Victor's older sister, the company's acting chairwoman. She was known throughout the business world for impossible negotiations and impossible standards. People called her cold, untouchable, dangerous. I'd met her countless times during board meetings, yet we'd never exchanged more than professional greetings. She rarely smiled, rarely attended family gatherings, rarely even acknowledged Victor's existence unless business demanded it. The security guard recognized me immediately. Mr. Hayes, I need 5 minutes with Chairwoman Ashford. It's nearly midnight. I know. He hesitated before speaking into his radio. A minute later, the elevator doors opened. She'll see you. That surprised me more than anything else tonight. The executive office occupied the entire top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a city blurred by rain. Elias stood beside them, still wearing a charcoal suit despite the late hour. She didn't turn around. I heard what happened. Her voice carried no pity, only certainty. The news travels fast. It always does when powerful families embarrass themselves. I let out a tired breath. So you call me here to apologize for your sister? Only then did she face me. Dark eyes. Perfect composure. No visible emotion. I called no one. Right. I'd come on my own. Perhaps because this building felt steadier than the empty apartment waiting for me. She studied my face for several quiet moments. You haven't cried. I don't perform grief. No. She nodded slightly. You endure it. Something inside me shifted. Not healed. Just noticed. I suppose Victor will inherit everything now, I muttered. A faint shadow crossed her expression. You still think tonight was only about romance. What else could it be? She walked toward her desk and placed a sealed envelope in front of me. I intended to give you this next week. I frowned. What is it? Read it. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. Inside was a formal contract. Not a business proposal. Not compensation. A marriage agreement. I looked up so quickly the pages nearly slipped from my hands. What is this? My proposal. I searched her expression for a trace of humor. There wasn't any. You've lost your mind. Perhaps. You expect me to marry my ex-fiancée's older sister? My older sister, she corrected evenly. And you think that's reasonable? No. She folded her hands. I think it's necessary. I laughed once. It sounded hollow. Necessary for whom? For both of us. Rain streaked the windows behind her, turning the city lights into blurred rivers. I dropped the contract onto her desk. I'm not interested in becoming part of your family's revenge. This isn't revenge. It certainly looks like it. Easier to believe that than the truth? The truth. For the first time since entering the office, Elias hesitated. Only a heartbeat. Long enough for me to notice. Then she opened a drawer and removed a worn leather notebook. The edges were faded. The corners softened by years of use. She slid it toward me. You may read the marked pages. I frowned. This is personal. It is. Then why show me? Because you've spent 5 years believing something that was never true. I slowly opened the notebook. The first marked page carried a date from exactly 5 years earlier. Today, Victor introduced Adrian to the family board. He apologized afterward because he assumed I disliked his friend. The truth is I couldn't look at Adrian for more than a few seconds. He smiles without calculation. People like that rarely survive this industry. My breathing slowed. I turned another page. A month later, he stayed behind after everyone left because he noticed an intern crying in the hallway. No cameras. No audience. He thought nobody saw him. I did. Another page. He recommended Victor for a promotion instead of accepting it himself. He still believes loyalty earns loyalty. I almost warned him. Another. He is getting engaged. I congratulated him. He thanked me with that same honest smile. I spent the drive home wondering whether silence is another form of cowardice. My fingers tightened around the paper. Every entry ended before becoming sentimental. There were no dramatic declarations. No desperate confessions. Only observations. Years of them. Quiet. Patient. Painfully restrained. I closed the notebook. It's genuine. You expect me to believe you've secretly loved me for 5 years. I don't expect belief. She met my eyes without blinking. I expect honesty. The office grew impossibly still. So why never say anything? You loved someone else. So you watched. I respected your choice. I swallowed. And now she made hers. The words carried no triumph. No satisfaction. Only fact. I looked away. Everything I believed about tonight suddenly felt incomplete. You knew Victor was seeing Lena. Yes. The answer struck harder than I expected. You knew. I confronted him. And he lied. Lena. She said she would end it. I laughed bitterly. Apparently she did. Just not with him. Silence settled again. Finally I asked, why didn't you tell me? Her shoulders lowered ever so slightly. Would you have believed me over your fiancé and your closest friend? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because I knew the answer. No, I wouldn't have. I would have defended them. I would have assumed Elias misunderstood. Or worse, that she wanted to interfere. The realization burned. I was a fool. You were loyal. There's a difference? There should be. I stood near the window, watching rain erase the city's reflection. What exactly does this marriage accomplish? She joined me, leaving a respectful distance between us. It gives neither of us what we lost. Then why? Because I refuse to build my future on my brother's lies. Her voice softened for the first time. And because I would rather offer you an honest beginning than watch you disappear, believing no one ever chose you. I closed my eyes. The sentence landed somewhere deeper than the betrayal itself. Not because it promised love, because it carried dignity. After several long moments, I whispered, I can't answer tonight. I know. She slid the contract back into its envelope without pressure or disappointment. The offer remains until you decide. As I reached the office door, her voice stopped me. Adrian. I turned. Whatever choice you make tomorrow. She held my gaze steadily. Don't make it because they destroyed your past. A faint vibration came from my pocket. I switched my phone back on. More than 100 missed calls flooded the screen. The newest message came from an unknown sender. If you marry Elias, I'll tell the whole city what really happened 8 months ago. I stared at the message. 8 months ago. The exact moment the betrayal had begun. Someone had been hiding far more than an affair. The message remained on my screen long after the display dimmed. If you marry Elias, I'll tell the whole city what really happened 8 months ago. No signature. No number I recognized. Just a threat. Or perhaps a promise. The elevator doors closed behind me, carrying me down from the executive floor while my reflection stared back from the polished steel walls. 8 months. The same period Lena had admitted she and Victor had been together. The timing wasn't a coincidence. Outside, dawn had begun to push through the storm clouds. I drove home without turning on the radio, letting the silence settle over the questions racing through my mind. When I opened my apartment door, I froze. Lena was sitting on my sofa. She still had a key. You shouldn't be here. She stood immediately. I needed to explain. You already did. No, I walked past her and placed my keys on the table. You chose him. It's not that simple. I looked at her for the first time since the engagement banquet. Her makeup had faded. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Months ago, that sight would have broken my heart. Now I only felt tired. What part isn't simple? She hesitated. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did. I know. No. My voice remained calm. You know that you were caught. That's different. She lowered her head. I deserve that. You deserved honesty long before tonight. She stepped closer. Can we sit down? I'd rather not. The rejection visibly stung her. She clasped her trembling hands together. Victor said you'd react like this. A bitter smile touched my lips. So he's still giving you advice. It isn't like that. Then tell me what it's like. She opened her mouth, closed it again. Finally she whispered. Things got out of control. I nodded once. They usually do when people keep lying. She reached into her handbag and pulled out the apartment key. It rested in her palm for several seconds before she placed it on the coffee table. I'll leave. As she walked toward the door, she stopped without turning around. Adrian. What? Don't trust everyone. The words lingered after the door clicked shut. Not forgive me. Not I'm sorry. Just another warning. Another mystery. My phone vibrated again. This time the caller ID displayed a familiar name. Mother. I answered. Where are you? She demanded. Home. Your father is furious. I assumed he would be. You embarrassed both families by walking out. I laughed softly. I embarrassed them? You should have handled it privately. I wasn't given that option. A long silence followed. Then she sighed. Come to the house. Why? They're all here. All. The Ashfords. Including Victor. Including Elias. I almost refused. Instead I said, I'll be there. My parents' estate had always felt more like a museum than a home. Every painting had been chosen to impress visitors. Every conversation carefully measured. As I entered the living room, the atmosphere immediately tightened. Victor stood beside the fireplace. Lena sat across from him. My parents occupied the central sofa. Only Elias remained apart from everyone else, calmly reading documents near the window. No one greeted me. Father spoke first. Sit. I remained standing. What is this? A discussion? About? Victor answered before anyone else could. The engagement. There isn't one anymore. We can fix that. I turned toward him. We. Lena made a mistake. She looked up sharply. I never said. Victor interrupted her with a glance. She was confused. Confused. That was his explanation for 8 months of betrayal. I almost admired the audacity. Father leaned forward. The public embarrassment damaged both families. A reconciliation is the smartest solution. I looked from one face to another. Business. Image. Reputation. No one had mentioned trust. Or love. Mother finally said, people will forget if the wedding happens quickly. Something inside me quietly settled. For years I had believed I owed these people endless understanding. Patience. Sacrifice. Today that obligation disappeared. I'm not marrying Lena. Silence. Father's expression darkened. You are thinking emotionally. No. I met his eyes. For the first time, I'm not. Victor stepped closer. Adrian, don't be childish. I smiled faintly. You've mistaken peace for weakness for too long. His smile disappeared. What does that mean? It means I'm done cleaning up after you. The room fell completely silent. Father rose to his feet. Explain yourself. I looked directly at Victor. How many times have I stayed overnight fixing your failed negotiations? Victor remained expressionless. That's irrelevant. How many times did I let you take credit because you said your father trusted you less than Elias? Stop. How many reports did I rewrite? Adrian, how many investors believed your presentations because I prepared every number? My father slowly turned toward Victor. His confident posture shifted almost imperceptibly. You never mentioned that. Victor forced a laugh. We worked as a team. No. I shook my head. I worked. You accepted applause. Lena stared at Victor as though hearing the truth for the first time. He noticed. His voice hardened. You volunteered. I did. So don't complain afterward. I'm not complaining. I straightened my tie with deliberate calm. I'm refusing to continue. The distinction mattered. Elias quietly closed the folder she had been reading. She hadn't spoken once. She didn't need to. Victor's confidence cracked for the first time. You think walking away makes you noble? No. It makes you a coward. I've spent years standing between you and the consequences of your own choices. I took one slow step backward. Today those consequences belong to you. He lunged forward. You're ruining everything. Before I could answer, Elias finally spoke. He already spent years preventing you from ruining it yourself. Every head turned toward her. Victor's face tightened. Sister, stay out of this. I've stayed out of it long enough. She placed a thin file on the coffee table. I completed an internal audit this morning. His expression changed instantly. What audit? The investment division. My heartbeat slowed. This had nothing to do with the affair. Elias opened the file. During the past 3 years, Adrian authored 27 strategic proposals officially credited to Victor. Father frowned. That's impossible. It is documented. She slid copies across the table. Email records. Revision histories. Meeting logs. Every page carried timestamps. Every page quietly dismantled Victor's carefully built image. I kept these, Elias said calmly, because I hoped my brother would eventually correct the record himself. Victor's breathing became uneven. You spied on me. I supervised the company. Those ideas belonged to the department. They originated from Adrian. No one spoke. Not even my parents. Lena picked up one document. Her lips parted. You told me these were yours. Victor reached for the papers. Elias closed the file before he could. Don't. He glared at her. Why now? Because Adrian has finally stopped protecting you. The sentence settled over the room like falling snow. Father slowly looked at me. Is this true? Yes. Why didn't you tell anyone? I answered honestly. Because he was my friend. No one could argue with that. Friendship had been my silence. Loyalty had become my blindness. Victor suddenly laughed. A desperate sound. So this is your plan? He pointed at Elias. You want to marry him just to humiliate me. I haven't accepted anything, I said. His eyes widened. You haven't. No. For a brief moment, surprise crossed Elias' face as well. Then it disappeared behind her usual composure. Victor seized the opportunity. You see? He turned toward everyone else. This is all manipulation. She's using company politics. Elias remained completely still. If Adrian refuses me, I will respect his decision. She looked at me, not at Victor. I always will. There was no pressure in her voice. Only certainty. That quiet respect contrasted so sharply with everything else in the room that it became impossible to ignore. At that moment, my phone vibrated again. The same unknown number. This time there was a photograph. I opened it. The image showed Victor entering a private hospital 8 months earlier. His arm was around Lena. The timestamp matched the week she had told me she was attending a charity conference overseas. Below the photograph was another message. Ask why they visited the maternity department. A chill ran through me. The affair wasn't the only secret. Something far bigger had begun 8 months ago. The photograph burned into my thoughts long after I locked my phone. A maternity department. 8 months ago. The same week Lena had kissed me goodbye at the airport, smiling as she insisted the charity conference couldn't be postponed. I remembered helping her pack. Remembered slipping a handwritten note into her suitcase because she always said business trips made her lonely. The memory now felt like someone else's life. Adrian. My father's voice brought me back. Everyone was still watching me. I have something to do. Victor frowned. We're not finished. We are. I walked toward the front door. You're running away again? I paused with my hand on the doorknob. No. Without turning around, I answered quietly. I'm simply no longer staying where I'm not respected. The words weren't loud, yet they silenced the room far more effectively than shouting ever could. I left. Half an hour later, I parked outside St. Gabriel Medical Center. The hospital looked ordinary enough. People hurried through the entrance carrying flowers, balloons, and paper bags filled with baby clothes. Life continued, completely unaware that mine had been carefully dismantled months ago. Inside, I approached the reception desk. I need information about a visit from 8 months ago. The receptionist smiled apologetically. I'm sorry, sir. Patient records are confidential. I understand. She looked relieved. I only need to know one thing. I'm afraid. Was there an emergency that week involving Victor Ashford? Her expression immediately became cautious. I'm not permitted to discuss patients. Of course she wasn't. I thanked her anyway and stepped aside. The answer wouldn't come that easily. As I turned toward the exit, someone called my name. Mr. Hayes? I looked over. A woman in her late 50s stood near the elevators wearing a doctor's coat. Silver-framed glasses rested low on her nose. I don't believe you remember me. I searched her face. Then recognition struck. You spoke at the Ashford Charity Gala. She smiled. Dr. Miriam Collins. Obstetrics. You have an excellent memory. Not today. Today memory felt more like punishment. She studied me for a moment before asking gently, Are you all right? I've had better weeks. I imagined so. There was something in her expression that suggested she knew far more than she intended to say. You knew Lena? I met her once. And Victor? A few times. Hope stirred inside me. I received an anonymous message. Her smile disappeared. I thought you might. The word sent a chill through me. You know who sent it? No. But I suspected someone eventually would. I stepped closer. Doctor, she lowered her voice. I cannot violate patient confidentiality. I wouldn't ask you to. I can, however. She hesitated. Tell you something about yourself. I frowned. Myself. You visited this hospital 9 months ago. I never did. You donated blood. I blinked. Blood. Then I remembered. Victor had called me in the middle of the night. His voice had been frantic. Please, Adrian. Someone I care about needs emergency surgery. He hadn't given a name. Only the hospital. Only my blood type. I'd rushed over without hesitation. You saved someone's life that night, Dr. Collins said softly. I never found out whose. No. She looked toward the nursery window. You weren't meant to. Was it Lena? Silence. I can't answer. Victor. I can't answer. My heartbeat quickened. Then why tell me this? Her eyes met mine. Because you deserve to know that your kindness was real. I frowned. I don't understand. Whatever lies were built afterward. She smiled sadly. The man who came here that night acted without expecting anything in return. Those words lingered long after she walked away. She hadn't answered my questions. Yet she'd reminded me of something I had almost forgotten. Who I was. Not who they'd turned me into. That evening I returned to my apartment. The hallway lights flickered as the elevator doors opened. Someone was sitting outside my front door. Lena. Again. This time she looked exhausted. She slowly stood. I've been waiting. I noticed. I know you don't want to see me. Then why are you here? Her eyes filled with tears. Because I can't carry this anymore. I unlocked the apartment. 5 minutes. She nodded gratefully. Inside, neither of us sat down. The familiar living room suddenly felt like neutral territory occupied by strangers. Lena clutched her handbag so tightly her knuckles turned white. I lied. I know. No. She shook her head. I lied about more than the affair. My chest tightened. The hospital. She closed her eyes. You know. I know you went. I was pregnant. The words landed with astonishing quiet. For several seconds neither of us moved. Neither of us breathed. Finally I asked the question I already feared. Mine. Her silence answered before she did. No. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the back of a chair. It was Victor's. She nodded once. I found out after. After we'd already. She couldn't finish. When? About 8 months ago. Exactly as the message had implied. I laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because if I didn't laugh, I might break. You let me plan our wedding. She cried openly now. I thought I could end things with Victor. But you didn't. He said he'd leave everything for me. And did he? Another silence. Answer enough. What happened to the baby? Her shoulders shook. I miscarried. The anger inside me paused. Not disappeared. Paused. Loss was still loss. No matter whose child it had been. I'm sorry for that. She looked at me in disbelief. After everything. I wouldn't wish that pain on anyone. She buried her face in her hands. I don't deserve your kindness. No. I answered honestly. You don't. She nodded through her tears. I know. For a while, only the sound of her crying filled the apartment. When she finally looked up, her expression had changed. Not hopeful. Resolved. Victor lied to me too. In what way? He told me your promotion had already been approved overseas. I frowned. What promotion? She stared. You don't know? I have no idea what you're talking about. Color drained from her face. He said you accepted a permanent transfer to Europe. I never received such an offer. He showed me emails. My stomach tightened. What emails? I thought. Her breathing became uneven. I thought you were leaving me first. Everything inside me went still. Victor. He hadn't merely stolen my fiancée. He had carefully manipulated both sides. Different lies. Different victims. One calculated outcome. Can you prove those emails existed? She nodded immediately. I saved screenshots. My pulse quickened. Why? I couldn't bring myself to delete them. She reached into her bag and handed me an old phone. I kept everything. The gallery contained dozens of screenshots. Emails. Messages. Calendar entries. Most looked authentic. Until I noticed one detail. The sender's address. One letter had been replaced. Almost invisible. A fake corporate domain. Someone with technical knowledge had created convincing forgeries. I looked at Lena. You never verified them? I trusted Victor. The irony settled heavily between us. So had I. A knock interrupted us. 3 slow, measured taps. I opened the door. Elias stood outside carrying a thin folder. She glanced once at Lena, but showed no surprise. I assumed I might find you here. You knew? I know my brother. She held up the folder. My cybersecurity team completed an internal investigation. I stepped aside. She entered calmly. What did they find? She placed several printed reports on the table. The fake email server. Lena gasped. Elias looked at her briefly. You've seen these messages before. Lena whispered, yes. Elias nodded. My team traced the server to a consulting company secretly owned by Victor through 3 shell corporations. The room fell silent. He fabricated evidence. I murmured. He fabricated narratives. Elias' voice remained steady. He isolated people by making each believe the other had already abandoned them. I slowly sat down. Every conversation, every misunderstanding, every growing distance between Lena and me. Someone had quietly orchestrated them. Lena covered her mouth. Oh God. Elias opened the final page. There is something else. What? She met my eyes. The anonymous sender who contacted you today. She paused. Used one of the hospital's internal networks. Before I could process that revelation, my phone rang again. The same unknown number. This time, instead of a message, there was only one sentence spoken through a distorted voice. Ask Dr. Collins who paid to erase the surveillance footage from the maternity ward. The line went dead. The apartment remained silent long after the call ended. No one spoke. No one moved. The only sound was the steady ticking of the wall clock. Elias was the first to break the silence. Play it again. I can't. I lowered the phone. It was a live call. She nodded once, already thinking several steps ahead. The hospital network. Lena looked between us. You think someone inside is helping? I think someone inside has been protecting Victor. Her answer settled over the room like ice. I turned to Lena. Did Victor ever mention the hospital after the miscarriage? She shook her head. Never. He refused to talk about it. Did he pay the bills? I don't know. Elias gathered the printed reports into a neat stack. We're going there. Tonight. The longer we wait, the more evidence disappears. No one argued. The emergency department was quieter than it had been that morning. Night nurses moved through the corridors with practiced calm. Dr. Miriam Collins was leaving her office when she spotted us. Her expression immediately changed. You came. I received another call. She glanced toward the nearby nurses' station. Not here. She led us into a small consultation room and quietly locked the door. What exactly did the caller say? I repeated every word. Her shoulders slowly sagged. I hoped that day would never come. You know what happened. She looked at Elias. You've already figured out more than most people. Elias remained composed. We only know someone erased surveillance footage. Dr. Collins closed her eyes briefly. Yes. Who authorized it? I don't know. You signed the paperwork? No. She opened a locked cabinet and removed an old archive box. I refused. She placed a thin folder in front of me. I made copies. Elias raised an eyebrow. You expected trouble. I've worked in medicine for 32 years. A tired smile crossed Dr. Collins' face. When wealthy families become involved, experience teaches caution. I opened the folder. Inside were billing records, visitor logs, security requests. One document immediately caught my attention. Surveillance deletion request. Authorized by Executive Administrative Office. No individual signature. Only a company seal. Ashford Group. Victor hadn't simply hidden the truth. Someone had used corporate authority to bury it. Lena's voice trembled. He couldn't authorize that. No. Elias stared at the seal. He wasn't senior enough. A realization flashed across her face. There was only one executive who could approve emergency corporate requests while our father was overseas. My pulse quickened. Who? She answered quietly. Our chief legal officer, Daniel Mercer. The name hit me with unexpected familiarity. Daniel had attended every major board meeting for years. Quiet, meticulous, invisible unless someone needed legal advice. I frowned. Why would he help Victor? I don't know. Dr. Collins hesitated. I've met Mr. Mercer only once. When? The day after. She glanced apologetically at Lena. The pregnancy ended. What happened? He arrived with 2 assistants. She swallowed. They requested every surveillance recording from that floor. And you refused? I refused to release them. What changed? My hospital director overruled me. Silence. Then Dr. Collins reached into the folder again. I kept one thing they never knew existed. She handed me a tiny memory card. I copied 37 seconds before the original files disappeared. Everyone stared at the card. 37 seconds. Perhaps the only surviving record. Elias looked at me. We need to see it. Back at Ashford Group headquarters, the cybersecurity department loaded the recovered file onto a secure computer. The room went dark. The recording began. The timestamp matched the day of the miscarriage. The camera overlooked a quiet hospital corridor. Victor appeared first. He looked nervous. Then Daniel Mercer arrived. They spoke. No audio. Only gestures. Daniel handed Victor an envelope. Victor opened it. His face turned pale. Then he nodded repeatedly. Seconds later, Lena emerged from another hallway, supported by a nurse. She looked devastated. Victor immediately hid the envelope inside his jacket before rushing toward her. The footage ended. 37 seconds. Nothing more. The room remained completely silent. Finally, I spoke. What's inside the envelope? Elias zoomed in on the final frame. The image blurred, then sharpened. Just enough. A logo appeared in the corner. Not hospital paperwork. Not legal documents. A laboratory. DNA diagnostic services. No one said a word. The image on the monitor remained frozen. A DNA laboratory. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. Lena leaned against the conference table. I never took a DNA test. Dr. Collins frowned. Not to my knowledge. Elias folded her arms. That doesn't mean someone else didn't. The room fell into thoughtful silence. One of the cybersecurity analysts suddenly spoke from the back. Chairwoman. Elias turned. What is it? I recovered metadata from the deleted security request. He projected another file onto the large screen. A chain of internal approvals appeared. Daniel Mercer. Hospital administration. Corporate finance. Then one final authorization. The name made every person in the room freeze. Harold Ashford. Victor's father. The founder of the Ashford Group. Elias' father. She stared at the screen without blinking. No. The analyst looked uncertain. The digital signature is authentic. Elias slowly shook her head. My father was in Singapore that week. He could still sign remotely. He never handled routine legal approvals. Something didn't fit. I looked at the timeline. Can you verify where the signature originated? The analyst typed rapidly. Several seconds later he answered. It wasn't signed overseas. What? The authentication server places the login inside Ashford headquarters. Elias' eyes narrowed. Someone impersonated my father. The room became even quieter. If Victor had forged his father's executive credentials, this was no longer family drama. It was corporate fraud. Lena covered her mouth. Oh God. At that moment, the conference room door opened. An elderly man entered without knocking. Harold Ashford himself. Tall despite his age. Silver-haired. His presence immediately filled the room. He looked first at Elias, then at me, finally at the frozen surveillance image. I see you found it. No one spoke. Harold walked slowly to the monitor. I never authorized any deletion. His voice was calm, but I wondered how long it would take before someone uncovered this. Victor stepped into the doorway behind him. His face had completely lost its confidence. Dad, Harold didn't even look at him. Be quiet. Victor fell silent immediately. The old man turned toward me. Mr. Hayes. I met his gaze. I owe you an apology. You owe me more than that. I know. He nodded. I believed my son whenever evidence was missing. And now? Harold looked at Victor with unmistakable disappointment. I've just reviewed the complete forensic report. Victor took a nervous step forward. Dad, listen. No. The single word stopped him. Harold placed another folder on the table. My investigators discovered every forged email server. He looked at Lena. Every falsified message. Then at me. Every report you wrote under Victor's name. Finally, he faced his son. You didn't inherit your mother's kindness. Victor's breathing became ragged. You don't understand. Then explain. I loved Lena. Harold's expression remained unreadable. So you forged corporate records? I had no choice. You always had a choice. Victor's voice rose. Adrian always won. I never competed with you, I said quietly. He turned toward me. That's what made it worse. His composure finally shattered. You were better without trying. The confession echoed through the room. Years of jealousy, years of resentment, years of manipulation, all exposed in one desperate outburst. Tears filled Lena's eyes. You destroyed everyone's lives because you couldn't accept comparison? Victor laughed bitterly. You chose him first. I loved him. You admired him. I respected him. Every sentence struck harder than the last. Victor slowly looked toward Elias. And you? She met his gaze steadily. You knew? I knew you were insecure. No. His voice cracked. You loved him too. The room became still. Harold slowly closed his eyes. So it was true. Elias neither denied nor defended herself. I never acted on it. No. Harold nodded sadly. You didn't. He looked at me once more. I cannot undo what my family has done. His voice carried genuine regret. But I will make certain no lie remains standing. Before anyone could respond, security officers entered the room. Daniel Mercer walked between them in handcuffs. The chief legal officer looked directly at Victor. You promised no one would investigate. Victor's face drained of all color. Daniel laughed once. They found everything. The consequences Victor had avoided for years had finally caught up with him. There was nowhere left to run. The courtroom was quieter than I had imagined. No shouting. No dramatic objections. Just facts. Evidence. Consequences. I sat in the second row while attorneys presented months of forensic reports, financial records, forged email logs, and recovered server data. Victor barely looked up. The confidence that had once filled every room had vanished, replaced by someone who seemed years older than he actually was. Daniel Mercer sat beside his own attorney, expression empty. The judge turned another page. The digital evidence confirms systematic falsification of corporate communications, fraudulent attribution of intellectual property, abuse of executive credentials, and destruction of protected records. Each charge sounded heavier than the last. Harold Ashford closed his eyes. Lena quietly wiped away tears. Elias never moved. I realized something unexpected. I wasn't waiting for victory. I was waiting for peace. Outside the courthouse, reporters rushed toward us. Mr. Hayes, did you know about the forged emails? Will you sue Victor personally? Are you taking control of the Ashford Group? Microphones surrounded me. Cameras flashed relentlessly. Months ago, I would have tried to explain everything. Today, I simply answered the only question that mattered. I won't spend my future reliving my past. The reporters fell silent. Another shouted, Do you forgive them? I thought carefully before replying. Forgiveness isn't something you announce at a press conference. Then I walked away. No security escort. No prepared statement. Just my own footsteps. A week later, my apartment felt strangely empty. Most of Lena's belongings had already been collected. The engagement photographs were gone. The wedding invitations had been recycled. Only one unopened box remained in the corner. I almost ignored it. Instead, I carried it onto the dining table. Inside were notebooks. Every business proposal I'd ever drafted by hand. Early sketches. Ideas. Dreams. At the very bottom rested a folded note written in my own handwriting. One day, I want to build something people trust. I smiled faintly. I'd forgotten writing it. Maybe because somewhere along the way I'd stopped building. I'd only been maintaining other people's success. A knock interrupted my thoughts. Elias. She held 2 paper cups of coffee. I assumed you'd still be awake. You know me well. I've observed you for years. The words carried no embarrassment anymore. Only honesty. I opened the door wider. She stepped inside. Her eyes immediately landed on the notebooks. You found them. I found myself. She looked at me for several seconds before nodding. I'm glad. We sat across from each other in comfortable silence. No expectations. No pressure. Eventually she asked, "What will you do now?" I looked around the apartment. "I don't know. You've always known." I frowned. She gently tapped the notebook lying nearest to me. "Those aren't investment reports. They're old ideas. They're your ideas." I opened one at random. Business models. Community lending platforms. Small business support programs. Scholarship foundations. Concepts I'd abandoned because someone else's priorities always came first. You kept these? I remember everything important. I laughed quietly. I've noticed. She looked out the window. The board wants you back. As what? Chief Strategy Officer. I immediately shook my head. No. She wasn't surprised. I thought so. I don't want my future to depend on cleaning up Victor's mistakes. It won't. I still don't. She smiled. Then refuse. There was something wonderfully simple about the conversation. No guilt. No manipulation. Just respect. For the first time in years, saying no felt liberating. Autumn arrived quietly. 3 months passed. The city continued moving as though nothing extraordinary had happened. People forgot headlines. Businesses adapted. Life insisted on continuing. So did I. Instead of returning to Ashford Group, I rented a modest office overlooking the river. The furniture didn't match. The coffee machine worked only when it wanted to. Half the lights flickered. It was perfect. My new company had only 6 employees. Every one of them had once been overlooked somewhere else. Talented people. Ignored people. People who deserved a genuine chance. On the first morning, I stood before the tiny team. No one here succeeds by taking someone else's work. Several smiled. One young analyst raised her hand. What if we fail? We'll fail honestly. The room relaxed. That was enough. Business grew slowly. Exactly the way I wanted. No shortcuts. No hidden deals. Only trust. One afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. Harold Ashford. He looked older than I remembered. The past months had not been kind to him. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all. He looked around the small office. This place reminds me of my first company. I'll take that as a compliment. It is. We shared tea instead of discussing business immediately. Finally he spoke. I've stepped down. I heard. Elias is officially chairwoman now. I expected as much. He nodded. So did I. After a thoughtful silence, he placed a small wooden box on my desk. What is this? Something that belongs to you. Inside lay a fountain pen. Simple. Elegant. The engraving stopped me cold. Presented to Adrian Hayes for outstanding strategic leadership. I stared at it. I never received this. No. Harold's voice was heavy with regret. It was prepared 3 years ago. What happened? He answered honestly. Victor convinced me you declined the recognition because you preferred staying behind the scenes. I closed the box slowly. Another stolen moment. Another quiet theft. Yet strangely, it no longer hurt the same way. Because now I understood something. Recognition delayed wasn't the same as worth denied. Harold stood. I can't ask for forgiveness. You don't have to. I can only apologize. I rose as well. You already have. He looked relieved. Not absolved. Just relieved. Sometimes that was enough. As he reached the door, he paused. Elias still hasn't withdrawn her proposal. I smiled. I know. I also know she won't mention it again unless you do. That sounds like her. He chuckled softly. It does. After he left, I looked out over the river. That evening, Elias called. How was your visitor? You knew? My father tells me more than he tells anyone else these days. I laughed. He brought me a pen. You deserved it years ago. I know. There was a comfortable pause. Then she asked, would you like dinner? Not. Have you made a decision? Not. What about the proposal? Just dinner. I looked at the sunset reflecting across the water. I'd like that. She didn't sound triumphant. Only quietly happy. Perhaps that was how genuine relationships began. Not with grand confessions, but with two people choosing, again and again, to show up honestly. As I locked the office for the night, I realized something. The betrayal had changed my life, but it no longer defined it. For the first time in a very long while, I was walking towards something instead of away from someone. Winter arrived with clear skies and sharp winds. A year earlier, I would have spent December attending holiday galas I didn't enjoy, smiling through conversations I didn't trust. Instead, I spent most mornings reviewing proposals beside a river-facing window while my employees argued over coffee flavors. Life had become unexpectedly ordinary, and I loved it. My phone buzzed. A message from Elias. "Dinner tonight?" I smiled. "You ask that every Thursday." A reply arrived almost immediately. "And you say yes every Thursday. Some habits deserve keeping." That evening, the restaurant overlooked the city skyline. Nothing extravagant. Nothing designed to impress. Just somewhere quiet. Elias arrived 10 minutes late. An unusual occurrence. "You were delayed." "Board meeting." "That bad?" "Worse." I laughed. She sat across from me and loosened the scarf around her neck. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It never had been. Eventually, she studied me carefully. "You're happier. You sound surprised." "I am." "Why?" "Because I spent years watching you carry responsibilities that belong to other people." The waiter poured water before discreetly leaving. I leaned back. "Do you know what the strangest part is?" "What?" "I don't miss any of it." The confession surprised even me. Not Victor. Not the old company. Not the endless sacrifices. None of it. Elias smiled faintly. "That's because grief and attachment aren't the same thing." I considered her words. As usual, she was right. Halfway through dinner, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. The expression on her face changed immediately. "What happened?" "It's Victor." The name still carried weight. Not pain. Wait. "He wants to meet." I remained silent. He submitted the request through his attorney. I understood instantly. Victor was serving his sentence. Communication was limited. Everything was monitored. "Did he ask for you?" "No." She hesitated. "He asked for you." The restaurant seemed to grow quieter. "What does he want?" "He didn't say." I looked out the window. Far below, headlights flowed through the city like rivers of light. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then, "I'll go." The correctional facility sat on the outskirts of the city. Cold gray walls, metal detectors, security checkpoints. The atmosphere felt heavy even before I entered the visitation room. Victor was already seated when I arrived. The glass partition between us reflected two very different lives. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I barely recognized him. Not because of the uniform, because the arrogance was gone. The resentment, the endless comparisons, all stripped away. He looked tired, human. Finally, he picked up the phone. "So you came?" "You asked." A weak smile touched his lips. "That sounds like you." I remained silent. Victor lowered his gaze. "I spent months thinking about what I'd say. And I don't think there are enough words." The honesty caught me off guard. He let out a slow breath. "I hated you." "I know." "No." His grip tightened around the receiver. "You knew I was jealous." His voice trembled. "You never understood how much." I listened. Not because he deserved it. Because I needed the truth. "I kept waiting for you to fail." He laughed bitterly. "And every time you succeeded, you thanked me for helping." His eyes reddened. "Do you know how infuriating that was?" "I never competed with you." "I know that now." Silence settled between us. Then he whispered something I never expected to hear. "You were my friend." Not best friend. Not partner. Friend. Past tense. The loss in his voice sounded genuine. For a long moment, I simply looked at him. The man who had betrayed me. The man who had manipulated Lena. The man who had stolen opportunities, forged records, and built his success on deception. Yet also the man who had once stayed up all night helping me move apartments. The man who had celebrated my promotions. The man who had laughed with me during years that, despite everything, had once been real. People were rarely one thing. That was the tragedy, and sometimes the excuse. Victor swallowed hard. I kept trying to become someone else. His eyes met mine through the glass. When I should have become myself. The sentence hung between us. Raw. Painful. True. I finally spoke. "What do you want from me?" His answer came immediately. "Nothing." I frowned. "Then why ask me here?" Victor looked away. "Because every apology I've given has been about reducing my guilt." The visitation room remained silent. "This is the first one that's about acknowledging your pain." I stared at him. No defense. No excuses. No attempt to rewrite history. Only accountability. Late. Very late. But real. "I can't give you back what I took." "No. I know." Another silence followed. Then I said the only honest thing I could. "I don't hate you anymore." Victor closed his eyes. A single tear slipped down his face. Not dramatic. Not theatrical. Just human. I don't deserve that. This isn't for you. He looked up. It's for me. The burden I'd carried for so long had already become too heavy. I wasn't interested in carrying his punishment as well. The guards announced the end of visitation. Victor slowly stood. So this is goodbye. I considered that. Then nodded. Yes. Not because I wished him harm. Not because I wanted revenge. Because some chapters were meant to end. And keeping them open only delayed healing. Victor placed a hand against the glass. I didn't mirror the gesture. I simply met his gaze one final time. Then I walked away. 3 months later, spring arrived. The river outside my office sparkled beneath the afternoon sun. Business had expanded. Not explosively. Steadily. The way trust grows. The way real things grow. A knock sounded at my office door. Come in. Elias entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. Some habits truly deserved keeping. Busy. Always. She handed me a cup before sitting across from me. For a moment, we simply watched the river. Peacefully. Comfortably. The way people do when silence no longer needs filling. Eventually, she reached into her bag. I raised an eyebrow. What now? A document. Should I be worried? Possibly. I accepted the envelope. Inside was a familiar contract. The same marriage proposal. Only now there was a handwritten note attached. No pressure. No deadline. Just honesty. I laughed. Only Elias would resubmit a proposal with a legal amendment and a reassuring disclaimer. She looked slightly embarrassed. A rare sight. I thought it was more appropriate than pretending I stopped caring. I read the note again, then looked up. For 5 years, she had loved quietly, patiently, without demanding anything, without interfering, without trying to possess what wasn't hers. And when my life collapsed, she hadn't rushed to take advantage of the wreckage. She had simply stood nearby, offering respect, offering truth, offering choice. I folded the document carefully, then stood. Elias watched me with unusual uncertainty, perhaps for the first time in years. I walked around the desk. She rose as well. What are you doing? Instead of answering immediately, I took her hand. Warm, steady, real. Then I smiled. I think you've waited long enough. For a moment, the brilliant chairwoman of the Ashford Group looked completely speechless, which might have been my favorite victory of all. Outside the window, sunlight danced across the river. Inside, the future remained unwritten. And that was the beauty of it. Not a perfect future. Not an easy future. Just an honest one. The kind built by people who finally stopped living for appearances. The kind built by people who chose each other freely. The kind worth protecting. And as Elias squeezed my hand and smiled back, I realized something simple. Betrayal had been the beginning of the story, but it was never the ending.